home, my life took a significant turn. I found myself living with just my mother, despite my deep appreciation for how she raised me. Recent tensions have strained our relationship, her sudden coldness, particularly after I've been financially supporting her, has been a tough pill to swallow. It hurts even more knowing Ethan and his wife Alice influenced her behavior towards me. This betrayal has fueled a strong resentment within me, pushing me to prove myself more fiercely. My name is Ava, and at 27, I'm facing these family dynamics amidst my own personal challenges. Since my father's death a few years back, and with Ethan moving on, it's been just Mom and me, but living with her hasn't been easy. Once I began earning, she stopped working and seemed to expect me to serve her every need, from meals on demand to unexpected financial requests. Her constant demands have tested my patience to its limits. Despite the turmoil, the thought of leaving her has crossed my mind multiple times, yet I've never seriously pursued it. She's all the family I have left, and she did raise Ethan and me by herself. Alice has explicitly stated she won't take in my mother, leaving me as her sole caregiver by default. But being her daughter doesn't mean I can endure endless demands without feeling the strain. Today, for instance, I confronted her about missing money, which led to a heated exchange. She admitted to taking it without asking, justifying her actions by reminding me of her sacrifices. This conversation highlighted a recurring pattern. Whenever I address my concerns, she deflects with reminders of her role in my upbringing. While I'm grateful for her efforts, my tolerance has its limits. I'm financially stable, capable of supporting both of us without compromising my lifestyle. However, the principle of the matter weighs heavily on me. It's become clear that setting boundaries is necessary, not just for my well-being, but for our relationship's health. In the midst of these challenges, Ethan and Alice's unexpected visit further complicated matters. Their presence and attitude only deepened my resolve to stand up for myself. Despite the complexities of family loyalty and obligation, navigating these waters has been anything but easy. Yet, this journey has been a profound lesson in self-reliance, setting boundaries, and seeking happiness amidst familial obligations. As I continue to find my way, I remain committed to caring for my mother while also prioritizing my own well-being and future. Every time I share my concerns with my mom, it ends up the same way. She counters with, "I'm the one who raised you," or "remember who you have to thank for your upbringing." These words always leave me at a loss for words. I fully recognize the hard work and dedication my mom put into raising me, which makes it all the more difficult to argue with her. Despite earning a good salary, enough to comfortably support both of us with an extra $28,000 a month without it affecting my way of life, I've always felt there should be limits to what my mom can demand from me. Then, one day after coming back from work, I was surprised to find Ethan and Alice at my place. It had been ages since we last spoke, not since our dad's funeral. "Looks like you haven't changed a bit, still surrounded by that gloomy aura," Ethan commented, highlighting a shift from the childhood days when he would belittle me. "Why are you even here, Ethan?" I asked, trying to keep my composure. He casually mentioned visiting our parents' house as if it was the most natural thing. "You know, after Dad passed and we had to sell the family home. I've been renting this apartment. It's not just our family home anymore." I reminded him, trying to assert some boundaries. Alice didn't waste time adding her 2 cents. "Ava, you're always so tense. With that attitude, you'll end up alone," her words void of any remorse, just like Ethan's, made it clear they hadn't changed. Disheartened, I retreated to my room after a solitary dinner, overhearing snippets of their conversation about me. Since that visit, Ethan and Alice began dropping by more frequently, acting as if they owned the place, which only added to my frustrations. "Ethan, seriously, what's the idea here? This is my space." I eventually confronted him, unable to tolerate their intrusions any longer. His dismissive response about wanting to see Mom more often did nothing to ease the tension. Despite their prolonged absence and sudden return, their casual disregard for my feelings and personal space was unsettling. This confrontation made me question their motives and consider setting clearer boundaries to protect my peace and independence. Since our father's passing, Ethan had barely made an effort to connect, and now he was dismissing my concerns as if they were nothing. "This is not about you," he said nonchalantly when I questioned his sudden presence. Hunger was his next complaint, demanding I cook immediately as if I had no other concerns. "Can't you see? This is my home. Why do you act as if you own it?" I wondered aloud, frustration mounting. Alice joined in with her own demands for a cake, as if it were the most natural thing. "Ava, you're not busy, are you? Go buy it for us," she said, with my mother echoing her sentiment, calling me lazy. It struck me as odd how Alice, who once couldn't stand being around my mother, was now cozying up to her, suggesting a hidden agenda. Ethan's assertion of his role as the eldest son responsible for our mother only added to my suspicions. Their behavior hinted at a plan I couldn't quite grasp, but I sensed it was nothing positive. After a few tense days, my mother dropped a bombshell, declaring she could no longer bear living with me and intended to move in with Ethan and Alice. Her words left me reeling, unable to comprehend how the dynamics had shifted so drastically. The same couple who had previously distanced themselves from my mother were now eager to welcome her into their home. The irony was not lost on me. Ethan and Alice's rival only added to the confusion. Ethan's rhetoric about his duty as the eldest son to care for our mother seemed hollow, especially considering their long absence. Alice, who had once vehemently opposed the idea of living with my mother, was now fully on board with this new arrangement. Their sudden change of heart and willingness to alter their stance on living with my mother raised many questions. It became clear that their motivations were far from altruistic, leaving me to ponder the real reasons behind their sudden interest in family unity. The sudden shift in their attitude was baffling and irritating. My brother announced, "Mom's moving in with us, and frankly, we don't need you anymore. Just leave." It was shocking. After years of me shouldering the responsibility for our mother, this abrupt dismissal felt like a betrayal, despite Ethan's often arrogant demeanor. I couldn't shake off the feeling that he and Alice were plotting something unsavory. My mother, despite her sharp wit, was the only family I truly valued. The last thing I wanted was to be caught up in any forthcoming mess. Determined to get to the bottom of things, I confronted my mother. "Don't you see? There's something off here." Ethan and Alice suddenly showing up. "And now this," I said. Her response was dismissive, accusing me of being the odd one out. Her next words cut deep, suggesting I was nothing more than a burden. My heart sank. After years of support and care, to be dismissed so coldly was more than I could bear. In that moment, any remaining affection I had for my mother evaporated. The realization that my efforts and sacrifices were so easily overlooked was a bitter pill to swallow. Yet, they seemed to take joy in belittling me, unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface. I vowed to myself they would regret their actions, but for now, I needed to bide my time. As I announced my departure, my brother couldn't hide his glee, assuming he'd won. "Looks like you're finally leaving. Mom's going to be so relieved." They laughed, reveling in their supposed victory. It was hard not to let my anger show, but I knew that revealing my plans would only give them the upper hand. From that day, Ethan and Alice made themselves at home in my apartment, acting as though I was a ghost among them. Their disregard for my presence was infuriating, yet it provided me with the perfect cover to lay the groundwork for my plan. They were oblivious to the fact that their actions had set the stage for their downfall. In their arrogance, they had underestimated me, a mistake I intended to use to my advantage. Ironically, their indifference played right into my plans, making my exit smoother than expected. A week later, as I was gearing up to move out, Ethan broke the silence with, "Today's the day, Ava. We'll take over caring for Mom so you're free of any burdens." His words, meant to sting, didn't touch me. I responded with a calmness that seemed to throw him off balance. My mother never wanted to miss a chance for a parting shot, expressing her hope that I'd find someone to marry, hinting at societal judgment for remaining single. As Ethan and Alice chuckled at her remark, I kept my composure, affirming my decision to prioritize my happiness and independence. "I've never relied on you for happiness, and I'm leaving by choice," I stated, cutting through their mockery. As the doorbell announced the arrival of the movers, I directed them to clear out not just my belongings, but all the household items I had purchased over the years. The shock on Ethan, Alice, and my mother's faces was palpable as they realized that everything from the TV to the kitchen appliances was mine to claim. Their protests and anger escalated as they confronted me, unable to comprehend my actions. "How can we live here without any of these essentials?" Ethan demanded, his voice rising in frustration. I stood my ground, reminding them that I was the one who had invested in all these comforts they took for granted. "Everything here was bought with my money for my home. You've decided to live together, so I'm sure you'll figure it out," I told them, firm in my resolve. Their outrage and disbelief were clear, but I didn't waver. This was the moment I reclaimed my independence, leaving behind the toxic environment they had created. As I watched the movers carry out the last of my possessions, I knew I was closing a chapter filled with manipulation and ungratefulness. Ahead of me lay a path to a new beginning, one where I could finally live for myself, unencumbered by the expectations and demands of those who failed to appreciate me. It seems there's been a big misunderstanding. Everything in this apartment, from the furniture to the appliances, was purchased by me. It appears Ethan was under the impression that our mom had financed it all, thanks to an inheritance from our dad. But the truth is, I've been the one supporting our mom, not the other way around. I've been contributing $28,000 monthly, making sure she has everything she needs. "Ethan, it looks like you got the wrong end of the stick, thinking there was a hefty sum." When I pointed this out, Ethan was taken aback. He had convinced himself and Alice that moving in was beneficial because they believed there was an inheritance from Dad that would cover everything. "Wait, are you saying all this time the support was coming from you, not an inheritance?" Ethan asked, baffled. My mother, caught in her own web of tales, had to admit she had exaggerated about the inheritance to impress them. She thought it would somehow make living together more appealing if they believed there was a financial cushion to fall back on. Realizing there was no inheritance left, Ethan's frustration was palpable. The idea of living together, which seemed so attractive when they believed there was a financial gain, suddenly lost its appeal. I only suggested we live together to keep up appearances, not because there was any real benefit to us. My mother confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. This revelation hit Ethan hard. The pretense of familial duty and the anticipated inheritance had clouded his judgment. Now, faced with the reality that the financial safety net he imagined was non-existent, his earlier enthusiasm evaporated. "So you're saying all the comforts of this apartment, everything we've been enjoying, was because of Ava's support?" he asked, disbelief coloring his tone. In a desperate attempt to salvage the situation, Ethan's wife suggested maybe Ava could still live with us. It could work out for the best. But the suggestion only highlighted the opportunistic nature of their earlier offer. It was clear now that their sudden interest in living together was motivated by self-interest, not genuine concern. The charade was over, the veil lifted, revealing the true colors of those I had called family. It was a sobering realization, one that marked the end of any illusions I had about where we stood. As I looked at them, their faces a mix of confusion and realization, I knew that moving forward, my path would be one I would tread without them. "So, Ava, you really should consider moving in with us," Ethan suggested with a sudden warmth in his voice that wasn't there before. It was clear they were now speaking out of convenience, seeing me as a solution to their problems. I couldn't help but dismiss their proposal outright. "Are you serious? Expecting me to live with you after everything? That's laughable. I've chosen to focus on myself from here on out. Your troubles, they're yours to deal with, not mine, I told them, my decision firm. As I spoke, the energy seemed to drain from them. They slumped, their faces a picture of defeat. Take care of yourselves, I said more to myself than to them as I closed the door on that chapter of my life. With the lease on the apartment ending soon and in my name, they'd be forced to find somewhere else to live. That wasn't my concern anymore. A week into my new beginning, my phone rang. It was my mother pleading for help. Ava, please. I can't manage on my own. Can you come back? She asked, desperation clear in her voice. But the bridge had been burned. Why don't you ask Ethan and Alice for help? It sounds like they've made their bed, I replied, my tone final. Hanging up and blocking her number, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The news eventually reached me that Ethan and Alice, along with my mother, were evicted from the apartment. With their savings depleted, finding a less than ideal new place and daily arguments becoming the norm, their situation seemed dire. Ethan was now the sole breadwinner, struggling to make ends meet. As for me, distancing myself from the toxicity had allowed me to save more and invest in my own well-being. The sacrifices I had made in the past were behind me. Now I was paving a path toward a happier, more fulfilling life on my terms.